All right. Welcome to Teachers Talk, episode 3 of Teachers Talk, which means that clearly we have the staying power to last in this environment. My name is Brian Higgins. I teach English Language Arts in Central Washington. I also teach AVID and Stagecraft and Drama and AP Language. And then we also have Cesar, who lives in Central Washington and teaches at a different school, teaching science and math. Cesar?
That is correct, yes.
And then we have Malia Renner-Singer, who is from Central Washington as well and is teaching social studies and AVID. Welcome back to the podcast video stream, whatever this is called. Let's start with our failure of the day. So what did you fail at today? I'm going to go first. My failures don't seem to be like a crazy huge today. Most of my failures recently are tech. I mean, they're tech failures. But I will say that lately, a failure of mine has been staff meetings, which happen just like 5 minutes earlier than I want them to. So my failure this week was to be fully professionally attired for a staff meeting. Luckily, my camera was off, so I didn't have to show anyone that my hair wasn't combed or that I wasn't wearing a shirt. But it's the first time, and the whole time I was just like, oh, I'm terrible. I'm a bad person. I'm a terrible person. So I felt really, really bad about it.
So the question is, did you have your camera off?
Yeah, it was off, 100%. Like
for the entire time.
So
and you're
I logged into Zoom and I stood like over here with my arm over here to make sure that I had my screen off. Just to be 100% sure. Like I was 5 minutes late to the meeting, and 3 minutes of it was like, I need to make sure that everything's off so that I don't embarrass myself.
So now you understand why students don't turn their cameras on. You had the same
one
experience.
reason. But here's what's really bad about it is I was like, I can either put on a shirt I wore yesterday or not. And I was like, my wife, if she sees me put the shirt on, is going to yell at me and make me like run downstairs and grab a new shirt, and I'll be late to this meeting. Like, that was my mindset. I was like, I just have to be on time to the staff meeting. So hopefully it'll never happen again. Cesar, what was your biggest failure today?
Well, dude, my biggest failure today was not publishing a assignment under one of my modules.
Yep.
And so when that happens, I just get my phone, because I send a remind, right? I send a remind out, even though they know that, hey, you got to go to modules, you got to go to Canvas and check your to-do list. So they know that, right? So then I send reminds to make sure that they do that. And I do that, and they're like, hey, it's not published yet. So then I get 15, 20 reminds, Mr. Mendoza, so-and-so, so-and-so. I'm like, I did it again. I forgot to click the publish button. So
it's so easy to not publish something.
Yeah.
What's weird is how bad you feel, like how like every email you get from a student, you're just like, oh, these students think I'm a failure at my job, like because they didn't hit this button.
Well, and they get so stressed.
Yeah, and it gives me stress because I noticed that my temperature level goes up a little bit, so I get a little hot when I think, I messed up, and my temperature, I can feel my temperature kind of get hot and warm, like I can feel my face getting red, like I'm embarrassed because I did it. So yeah, it does cause a little bit of stress on my part.
You're turning red, but there's no one around to see that you're turning red. Yeah. Like you're getting embarrassed all by yourself in your classroom.
I messed up. Yeah, I messed up. Yeah.
That's funny. I have multiple failures to share with you. So the first one actually happened, it was yesterday, I'm sorry. But Brian, I had the experience of doing a Zoom where I left people in the waiting room. I didn't realize they were 20 minutes. They were in the waiting room for 20 minutes, and I had no idea that they were in there. And it took them leaving the waiting room and coming back for them. I don't know how I didn't see it. Like I'm normally just I just don't ever leave the waiting room view. So I felt horrible about that. Have you done that too?
So I had a teacher tell me that you can set up and you can play a sound when somebody comes in.
Yes. So I learned how to do that. Yeah.
I learned how to do that. So
that helps out a lot. I tell my students all the time now, I'm like, remember, if you're stuck in the waiting room, you need to text someone in class to tell me to get you in the waiting room. But I always forget to put the chat box up too. So I never like see the chat. And so it's when I share my screen is the best because I always put like the room and the chat on my shared screen because they can't see it. Because you
Right.
can't see Zoom when you're sharing. So I can have it right in front of me with whatever document I'm working on. But so I try to share my screen as often as possible. That's how I'm dealing with that.
Yeah. My second one was today. I was on a Zoom and I had a guest speaker. Oh my gosh, you're going to predict what happened. So I had a guest speaker and I made the guest speaker the host so that they could share their screen. And then the guest speaker was done speaking and you know what happened? They left the Zoom, and because they were still the host, it closed down my entire Zoom. Like my Zoom was gone.
Well, you made them the host.
I don't know, I guess I don't know how to have them share screen. Oh my gosh.
You can make them a co-host next time.
Yeah, I hadn't made them a co-host. I made them the host. And then they left, and when they left, my Zoom was gone. So then I had to get back on my Zoom, and the kids were totally confused. And then eventually 8 kids showed up, and I was like, okay, let's just, I mean, it had been a long guest speaker. Like it was kind of okay, but still, it was just, oh my gosh. And then my last failure is one that I think, I'm sure a lot of us are having and we don't want to admit, like, you know, when you get engrossed in something on the computer, like something you're trying to create on the computer for kids, and you cannot stop working on it, like your brain, it's like teachers who make their Bitmoji classrooms and literally 12 hours later, they realize that they've worked for 12 hours on their Bitmoji classroom. Like I was working on something today and I lost all track of time, and then I had a goal to be done by 3. By 3:25, my kids are coming up to me and they're like, Mom, it's almost time for you to be done. Like, why are you still on the computer? And I just could not, my brain could not stop. Like, I couldn't stop doing it. It was so bizarre. So that felt like a failure because I didn't force myself to stop working when my workday ended. I just kept going.
Yeah.
So.
See, that happens to me with emails. If I'm responding to an email, I find that, hey, I should respond to an email, a few sentences, and that's it, right? But then I find myself, I look at the clock, look at my watch, I'm like, I spent 20 minutes on this email because I'm trying to be as clear as possible. I'm trying to include as much as possible, and come across professional, come across as, hey, I'm here for you. I want to support you. And so I just spend too much. And you're right. I spend too much time on emails, and I'm trying to get better. So hopefully in the future I can maybe make some goals. 5 minutes, go.
Right. That was my goal, and I just kept going.
Zone it. You're getting in the zone. All right. So today we're going to talk about childcare. For everyone out there, we live in an area of Washington that is thinking of trying to go back to school at some point, which is great because we want that. And there's a lot of talk, nationwide even, about the hybrid system because it's going to be really tough to get kids all the way back into school safely. So recently I overheard some conversation and had received some emails where I'd seen people talking about childcare and how coming back hybrid, how it affects childcare. And so some districts, at least some districts locally, are allowing teachers to have their kids at the schools while they're doing teaching so that teachers are there to teach kids. Because if they can't have their kids at the schools, then they're just going to get a sub, and then we don't really have our best chance at getting education across to the students. I totally understand that. But my response, and I just have to warn listeners because I don't want you to hate me, I had just a very emotional response. And I'm a teacher who tries to teach his kids to separate their emotional response from their logical response to things. So when I heard these teachers talking about how devastating the loss of the childcare would be when they had to go back to work, I was just like, what are you talking about? Like, you guys are getting free childcare from a district that doesn't have to give you free childcare. So you're profiting. And now you're mad that you have to go back to work and your kids won't have free childcare anymore. That was just my emotional response. Luckily, I don't say those things out loud often until after I've processed them. And in talking to people, I process that I do not have a perspective that really knows exactly what that struggle is. And so we thought we'd talk about that struggle today, the struggle with childcare, especially for teachers coming back, and what that's going to look like and why it is a scary ordeal. So Let's start. Let's just hear some background really quick on each of us. I don't have any children. I had a foster daughter who was a high school student for a couple of years. So when it comes to childcare, I have not had to worry very much about it. But I do come from a big family. So I understand that at all ages, you have to have different levels or different layers of childcare depending on your kids. So I had 5 siblings and we all are 3+ years apart. So there's always a difference there. Cesar, I can tell by the crayon on that door behind you that there are children somewhere in your life.
Well, they're not my children. I don't have children. That marker is my little my niece. My brother came over and visited, and she had to go at it with her markers on my door over there. But you know, as far as the experience with kids, my mom has had a home daycare since I was, heck, as long as I can remember. You know, all the way till college. I would come home on the weekends from college and pass out on the couch and wake up in the mornings, even on Saturdays, and there'd be a kid, looking me straight in the face. A little 3 or 4-year-old. So my experience with daycare, with childcare, I've been around it, but I haven't had the personal experience of transporting, a child, to daycare while I go to work. So I haven't had that experience, but I've been around it, and I know that it's an important thing that needs to be provided for working people, because I do have 2 dogs, and I'm not going to compare kids with dogs, but they do gotta,
Use the
I guess
bathroom.
get fed, gotta use the bathroom, so you gotta worry about that. So I mean, the comparison is not even fair, but I do, have an idea that there is some sort of responsibility that goes along with having children. Right?
Okay.
All right.
And Malia, you have children, actually.
Yeah, I have some sort of responsibility. I love it. I have a 14-year-old daughter who will actually be in Cesar's math class next semester because she's a freshman at Cascades High School. And that's a whole new experience, by the way. That's a whole other thing, is what happens when your child is a student at your school and you're now not just a teacher, you're also a parent. It's insane.
You should hear it from the kid's perspective.
Because
my mom was a teacher and my dad was a principal.
Yeah.
So I've been there.
Yeah, and then my husband's a principal, and then my youngest daughter is a 5th grader. And I never stopped teaching. So when I had both of my children, I took maternity leave, and then I went right back to work. So I was pretty much, and I don't live in a region with, my family is, my closest family is 2 hours away. So I've always had to struggle to figure out childcare for my kids, including baby care when they were babies, and then all the way through. And in fact, one of the reasons why I stopped teaching and went actually and started teaching in Leavenworth, the community I live in, almost entirely was because it would be easier for me as a mom with my childcare options and with my transportation for my kids. And by the way, I was also part-time. I've taught 20 years, but I'm only on year 3 right now, honestly, of being a full-time teacher. I was always like 0.6 or 0.8. And a lot of that was I just needed flexibility in my schedule in order to accommodate the needs of my kids. So this is like a long ongoing thing that all parents go through. But I think what Brian, the reason why we're doing this is Brian and I are having a conversation, and I said, Brian, every time we talk about like going back to school, I get these thoughts in my head that stress me out, and that I literally haven't had in 20 years, not even when my daughters were babies. And the thoughts are, am I going to have to resign?
Like, yeah, that was the most jarring thing for me, is because your solution to the childcare problem was to resign.
Yeah, I've thought it popped up over the summer when we were talking about plans for reopening, and then it just popped up in the last week when we were talking about plans. And by the way, I'm not going to have to resign, but I have those thoughts, like that enters my head, my brain as a working mom is, how am I going to make this work? And what kind of leave am I going to have to take in order to make this work? And teachers are not alone. It's honestly kind of hard to have this conversation at all, because in a public way, kind of want to give myself permission to talk about this publicly, because I know that I have a job, and I know that I'm super lucky to have a job, and I'm lucky to have insurance, and I'm so privileged right now because I have employment. And so sometimes and I'm going to talk about moms especially, but we kind of keep quiet about what we're going through because, well, at least I have a job, right? Like, at least I'm not dependent on outside resources. So what do you have to complain about, Malia, kind of thing. And I also know that as the teachers, it's not just teachers, it's all jobs. It's all everywhere. We're all dealing with this because the reality is we don't have school, and school is about school, but it's also about having a place for our kids to go so we can do our jobs. And now school is gone. And so if there's situations where a teacher is going back to work, but their child doesn't have the option to go to school, and there's no childcare out there for them as options, then that makes it an almost impossible situation. Which is why I think, Brian, your district did what it did, which was provide childcare for their teachers, because otherwise their teachers couldn't teach because there's just childcare options aren't there. Or if they are there, they are insanely expensive, like expensive to the point that unless you qualify for aid, it's really doesn't financially necessarily make sense to do childcare situations. So I've already said this, but I would love to have Cesar's mom living down the road for me. Like, oh my God, I would kill to have Cesar's mom living down the road for me. And because you have to know, by the way, I'm sorry, in our community right now, well, neither of you actually live in Leavenworth, but in Leavenworth, we have very little childcare options, especially for babies. Oh my gosh, if anyone has a baby right now in Leavenworth, there is nothing out there for them for babies, for younger than 2. So it's tough.
And I just wanted to throw out there, kind of add to your situation,
yeah,
Malia, is that the stats about teachers and the majority of our teachers, the stereotypical teacher is female in their early 40s with children. And then I was listening to that and kind of taking that in. And of that, majority workforce in education, those teachers don't feel that they can do or perform their job adequately by doing both. You have, remote learning, you have daycare. What happens when you mix the two, especially with the hybrid?
Right.
So, I just want to echo that, you're going through that, and then the majority of the educator workforce is, in your situation.
So the teaching group that I like right now, I'm the most worried about, honestly, is our elementary teachers, because elementary is going back first. So our elementary teachers are going to be the first among the spectrum to be having less flexibility in their schedules because they'll be in the buildings at set times with students. But they might have little ones or bigger ones that don't have the same schedule. So they're the ones who are going to have to scramble to figure something out the most immediately. And so, yeah, I feel for them. I mean, as a secondary teacher, I have more time because we're later on we're later for when we're coming. And honestly, I don't even know, by the time secondary, like high school, is teaching, my kid might be pretty much in school by that point. I don't really know. We're just still trying to figure it out. And so my childcare needs get less. But there's still a reality that I know that women, and it always falls on the mom. I mean, it sounds sexist to say it, but it falls on the mom still, that women across the country right now in all jobs are thinking, I can't make this work. Like there's no way. And it's taken a pandemic for me to feel that way. But yeah. Do you guys know Lean In? So I can't remember the lady's name. She's Facebook lady. Have you heard of her movement? She's like Zuckerberg's person. She's leading this movement called the Lean In movement, or she wrote a book about it. And it's all about women in careers and that women need to lean into their careers rather than leaning out. Anyways, they just published this thing that is like, women in professions right now are in crisis. Like they've never seen this before because of the sheer amount of women who are saying, in the next year, I'm going to have to either stop working or seriously decrease my workload because I have to take care of my kids. Like my kids are my number one priority. So, but what do you do if you can't afford? I mean, like.
Well, here's what's really, here's what is bizarre to me that I didn't actually think about. And that is one, there are no options for childcare because it's either against the law right now to have one out, right? Because we're closed down, or because you want to make sure your family stays healthy.
Yes.
You're not going to send your kid out to a childcare where there's, 15 kids that you don't know what their protection level at home is.
Right. So you're
not going to invite people like me. I'm just like, I have this fantastic basement apartment that is empty. And I'm just like, man, I could ask someone to come in here and run a daycare out of here just to help the community. Except that that's not really that safe. Like we can't really determine how safe it is. So while it might help out those families, it actually might not help those families. And then the other thing is the work side of it, like working, even if I just think that there are probably some people out there who are like, well, if teachers are working from home, it's easy to take care of your kids because you're at home with your kids. But it's not. It's like doing any other job with your kids in your office space. And how some of us use, some people, I'm not going to say that's because I'm not a parent, but some people use their job to, as an escape sometimes because they can separate. And that's why I think I see a lot of teachers at the high school building, is because we can put up those walls to be like, I just need to separate my brain space to make sure I'm focusing on the thing that I'm supposed to focus on while I have my kids being focused on by someone else like they are during the school day. And so having to split that focus, I can only imagine, like, I just want to acknowledge how tough that is for teachers at home and parents at home. Like it is probably, I can't imagine how hard it is for a parent who's staying home right now with their kid, who has to educate their kids and be the translator of that knowledge that's coming from those teachers, and be the person who's intervening with those skills and double checking, especially with all the changes there have been to the way we do math and the way we do English. Like I can only imagine how stressful and crazy it feels to be a parent right now, and also to not be able to say, you know what, I'm just going to put you in the hands of someone who can do this job for 7 hours.
Yes.
So that I can focus on my mental health right now too. Like there's no escape for them.
Yeah, and so it's not just teachers, it's anyone who's working at home, right? And who's been able to figure out how to work at home, which seems like a blessing, because it is a blessing, because you're able to not then, we do have childcare out there, Brian, but you're right in that if it's so unsafe for our kids to be at school, then why is it safe for my kid to, there's a lot of mixed messages out there. Like it's unsafe for kids to go to school, but it's okay for them to go to daycare, right? So it's really confusing. And also, we haven't had anyone in our house, like not even my kids' friends have really been in my house since March. Like we're not back to normal in our everyday life. And so, yeah, it's tough. I was going someplace else with this. I forget. Oh, among my my friends who are parents, if you have an early elementary child, like kindergarten, first grade, second grade, that kiddo needs adults way more in terms of their learning, more than like an upper elementary, middle school, high school student necessarily does. And so that's a group of parents that are really struggling right now, which is why in some ways this is the double-edged sword of it. Like it's so amazing that we're going to be able to open our pre-K, K1 and 2, because those kiddos are so desperate for that in terms of their learning, but then it puts a strain on the teachers. And we need our teachers.
I think another thing too, in regards to babysitting, you talk about babysitters, but then you also have babysitters who are students.
Yes.
And so that translates to a different population within our community. So historically speaking, if you look back at, white Americans when they first showed up here, they'd have 10 kids, 15 kids, and then as generations evolve, you have, 5 kids. And now we have like 2 kids, 3 kids. The same thing with, people who are new to this country, same thing. People from, Central America, South America, or Mexico, they come here, again, 5 kids, 6 kids, first generation, second generation, maybe they have 2 or 3 kids. So then it goes to, okay, it's tough for people to work at home as professionals, but now you imagine, hey, they're students and they're also babysitters. And so now you're asking them to do the same thing that we are doing. So it's kind of like a perspective on the student and also a perspective of, babysitting on both sides,
Exactly.
parent and
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, Cesar, because I think that we're going to follow up in another episode to talk about that, because that's a whole different beast. But I am going to put the brakes on the conversation because we are way over time. So sorry to everyone out there who we went way over time, and sorry to those of you who wanted to hear more, but you'll hear more in a little bit. So thank you very much for listening. Please hit like and subscribe and share this with your moms. That's what we do. So that'd be really great. Thank you and goodbye. I'm going to hit stop.